Hello, kind beings. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for resuming once again our conversation. We find great delight in having these conversations with you. We find great wisdom in your questions and your answers and your insights and your epiphanies. We quite enjoy being here with you. You are our teacher and our master, as much as anyone is anyone else's. And so we would love to know who has the first question or comment for us today.
Hi, Saul. No one wants to start. This is something that it kind of just came to me. I've been noticing recently. Well, I kind of go in and out of music having like this really profound effect on my mood and my being. And I don't know what the question is, but I guess my question would be, what is your understanding of how music is a different form of communication amongst humans than, say, talking or written or whatever? Like, what's the purpose of music? Maybe that's it. I don't think that's the question, but it's just like, or I guess to drill down a little bit more, do you think just depending on what's going on, that maybe it may feel more meaningful because of a certain lesson that we're working on, or just a certain part of life that we're contemplating?
Yes. We would say that music is a direct connection to the areas of the brain that are often important in opening up to higher wisdom, to intuitive wisdom, to downloaded wisdom, more so than maybe perhaps other forms of art, such as reading or film or painting. For music is the one that you use your hearing for. Yes, it is very different. And so in this, there is a way to connect to or channel perhaps some subliminal or subconscious or just on the verge of perception awareness that you need in that moment. That is accessible through other forms of communication, through other forms of art, but we would say hits you a slightly different way because it comes into your system in a slightly different way. Yes. And so just like something like smell hits your system in a very different way, music hits your system in a very different way. Yes, because it is using one sense in the exclusion of all others, to the exclusion of all others, in a way that activates different parts of your brain, different parts of your awareness, different parts of your connection with the higher source. That being said, we then have the sound, that is the mode of the communication, and then we have the artists who are creating the music, who are channeling the music, yes. And they themselves are prophets, like any artist is, yes. And they are bringing to us not only their ability to manipulate this physical medium, yes, create the sounds and write the songs, but also their particular understanding of the cosmos, their particular understanding of the infinite, their particular understanding of that connection between our human selves, our emotional selves, yes, and our higher selves. And so this is why in different instances you would want to listen to different types of music, because really all you're asking is for a different channel. I would like to talk to this oracle today, please. And the next day you might want to talk to a different oracle and a different oracle. Or sometimes you want to listen to the same oracle 7 days in a row, yes? And so just like there are all sorts of different spiritual teachers teaching the same thing, yes, we are all saying the same thing, but sometimes you want to listen to one more than the other, and it is the same thing with music. And this, of course, is true for any medium. Sometimes you want to read certain authors or look at certain painters or, read certain poets, et cetera, and you get into, as they say, groove with one or another of them. But it is really just your subconscious awareness of what your soul needs at the moment that will drive you towards a particular medium, and then from that medium, a particular type of music or artist, et cetera, et cetera. Is that helpful?
Yes, definitely. And yeah, especially the last part about almost on some level seeking it out because that's what you need at that time or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Good question. We have not been asked about music before.
I have a question. I was wondering about the impact of our thoughts on our energy body or on ourselves, and also the impact of the taking off on the concept of sound on what one watches or reads on our energy body. So I guess that goes back to thought again. Generates.
Well, first we will say that there is not a way to differentiate between your energy body and all of your other ways of being. Yes, they are all one. And so what affects one will affect all of them. Yes, it is like pulling on a string. Yes, it will pull on the whole thing. It will unravel or will weave together or whatever it will do.
Thank you.
We will say that there is a particular concordance between thoughts and our energy bodies. And because our energy bodies are more instantaneously malleable than our physical bodies, they can be changed very quickly with things such as thoughts, yes, or things such as music. And so that is why it is important to remember that what you are experiencing right now in this moment is not permanent, and it could change in the next moment. Yes. And so the things that you observe in your physical body, like you are very unlikely to have an arm this moment and not have an arm the next moment. Yes, that is very unlikely. However, it is quite likely that you could be despondent this moment, and in the next moment, see your child smile, and all of a sudden your mood, your energy body, your thoughts, your being has completely changed. Yes. And so we would say that it is your astute observation that these things can change our energy bodies so quickly is also an important lesson, that these things can change our energy body very quickly. Yes. And so use that. It is a great tool. And we think that what it is bringing is a counterbalance to the narrative that there is a you. Yes, that you are a person who tends to do this, or you are a person who tends to think this, or you are a person that has these belief systems or those values. Yes. That can change in an instant, unlike your arm appearing or disappearing. Yes, you could learn one new fact and completely change your system of values. Yes. And so what does that mean? Really, it is a lesson in non-attachment. It is a lesson in the idea that this is a story. It is interesting to us that the word for what has happened in the past is history. Yes, it's a story. We are recognizing that we are creating a story moment by moment, but that is all it is. And we can continue the narrative as it has been going, or we can have a twist and turn and all of a sudden Alice falls down the rabbit hole and something has completely changed. Yes. And so the question is, if my thoughts are really the only things that are creating what I tell my story as, then that means I have complete control over my story. And that means I have complete control over what is happening to me in this moment. Now, you do not kind of have control over the circumstances, but you do have control over the story. And so the trick is remembering that you have control over the story at all times, and also understanding that the story is an illusion and sitting in that paradox. Yes, so this is happening to me. And also none of this is happening to me because it is all a story.
Very, what I say, I can't describe it in words other than to say some veil or misperception was pierced and disappeared. And that spoke very deeply to what I know is true through experience. It spoke. Thank you.
Yes, yes, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Anna says she needs to go. That leaves Kathy. Or if Jennifer or Susan have a further question or a further insight or a further idea.
For this moment, I'll briefly say I am so grateful that I can bathe in this energy, share this with all of you. And so that's exciting, and thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It adds so much to have you here.
Talk so late.
I don't know that well, it's sort of a question. Their guidance last week was really helpful in terms of a year of no. And I have to say that I'm not doing very well. So I don't know if you had any further guidance on, it's so ingrained in me to be helpful.
Mm.
And we're coming into the season of giving too. So
We would ask you to consider two things. One is, of course, you're not good at it. You're just practicing. We have created a society where we have lost the art of apprenticeship. We have lost the art of knowing that there is a time when you are a beginner, of being gentle with that process and understanding. And so we would say, celebrate the fact that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You have come to a new awareness, a new understanding, and you are like a sponge. You are trying to absorb right now, but you are not necessarily doing the output. You are in the absorption phase. What does this mean? I am sitting with this. I am letting it flow through me. I am letting it come into existing. I'm letting it germinate. Yes, we do not expect a plant to go from seed to full-grown tree as soon as it realizes it's supposed to be a tree. Yes, we give it time. We give it time. So that is the first thing, is that we are happy to see that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. The second thing we would say to you is, reflecting your bad words back to you, you said, I am so used to being helpful. And we would like to invite you to think of different circumstances. These may not be necessarily in your life, because it may be easier just to start with hypotheticals. But what would be a circumstance where being helpful would not mean being nice or kind or doing for another? What are other types of being helpful? And we think that you are rightfully so using your own experiences of coldness that you received.
Mhm.
And you are trying to do the opposite of that. And while it is, when we are healing, emotional wounds, when we are healing trauma, we don't know another way of being. Yes, that is what we've learned. And so it is only natural that the first thing we would try is we would say, well, I do not like this way of being. I am going to try the opposite way of being. Yes, I am going to see what I was missing, and I'm going to fill in the gaps with that thing. Yes. And that is always the first step, almost always the first step. And that is a very, very good first step. However, like all polarities, now you are simply looking at something as black and white, and you are not filling in the gray. So then the next step in the healing is to say, there's gray areas. Well, that's annoying. I just wanted the simple solution of doing the opposite of what I was doing, and I wanted that to work. But there is complexity here. There is texture. There's more that I could see when I first looked at this problem. This is a thornier issue than when I first looked at it. Yes. And that is when it is then important to do exactly what you're doing, which is go back into that place of reflecting, of germinating, of letting it sit in you, of not pushing and doing. Yes, of being in that more feminine energy of, there is more here. There's more mystery here that I need to sit with. Yes, for the first step in looking at any kind of mystery, any kind of leap of awareness of consciousness, is to sit in the mystery. Yes, we think many, many texts talk about sitting in the mystery, because the mystery is not something that you can, through brute force or through logical thinking or through any other sort of yang energy such as that, you cannot push your way through to knowing. Knowing is an internal process. Knowing means sitting with something and letting it swirl around in the depths of the not knowing until it becomes knowing. Until one day we say, ah, yes, that is what it is. Yes. And so we would invite you to sit with the mystery of the idea of helpful. There are more dimensions to that than the two you have been exploring. And so we invite you to just sit with it. In that state of a beginner's mind, I am open to everything. I do not know. What a wonderful place to be. The beginning of everything. Infinite possibility. And we would invite you just to sit and say, there is more to this than I know. I will sit in the mystery. And this is where intuition comes into play, yes, as well, because suddenly you will have an idea to do something that makes no sense. You've never tried before. No one's ever taught you that. Where did that come from? That came from sitting in the mystery and letting your intuition bring you the answers instead of looking outside of you for a ladder that you can climb. You can either climb the ladder and make progress that way. That is a very good way. Or you can go into the well and sit in the darkness and wait for things to come to you. And that is also a very good way. And we need both. We need both. So just for the sake of argument, we would ask you to ponder, maybe as your first thing, to let's sit in the mystery. We think that you have an idea that being helpful means making something easier for someone. And yes, that can be one way of making something helpful or being helpful. But we would invite you just to think about this. What if being helpful was making something hard for someone? Well, that goes against everything we've been taught, yes. But if there is one possibility, its opposite is always true in some way or another, in some form or another. We can be cruel to someone by being kind to them. And these are things that we understand will not make immediate sense to your logical brain. And that is the reason we are presenting them to you, is we do not want you to use your logical brain. This is why they are mysteries. Things that are clear cut and easy are not mysteries. I push the button and the machine turns on. Well, that's not a mystery. But what if, when I looked left, right, sideways, up, down, and then thought about dinosaurs, the machine turned on? That's a mystery. Doesn't make sense. So we invite you to stop trying to make sense. There is a time and place for using sense, and there is a time and place for using that deep knowing, that intuition. Does that help?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Because I think the interesting piece of this is, as you were talking, that because of the harshness that I knew growing up, being helpful is it comes out of fear. If I'm helpful, then there won't be as much chaos or harshness or anger.
Yeah.
If I make things nice and easy. So playing with this idea of making something hard for someone is scary.
Because it feels like you are being uncaring.
Well, no, it feels dangerous
Mm,
for me. It's putting me in
Mm.
danger.
yes. Yes. And so that is an important moment to recognize two things. One, the emotional memory is just as strong as it was when you were 4 or 5 or 6. But you have another part of you that understands that you are not 4. Yes. And that you will not, it is not as dangerous as it was for you back then.
Mhm.
And so there is a part of you that needs to comfort yourself when these feelings come up. The other aspect to remember is that there is no danger because you cannot be hurt. You are an eternal being. And this is where it comes in handy to have a spiritual practice. Yes, because when we look at people who really have done a lot of work in recognizing their humanness and their spiritualness at the same time, we will say, look at Jesus. Yes, for it is around
Mhm.
that season when we think of him. He did not worry about being hurt. He did not worry about being in danger because he understood that that was temporary. It's just an experience, not a pleasant one, just an experience. Much like we have said, if you took a trip to see the pyramids in Egypt, it'd be quite hot inside those pyramids. Not pleasant, but just an experience you're having while you're on this wondrous trip. For that is what is happening, is you're on this wondrous trip. Yes. But we understand that fear is a great we will say demotivator. The things that we might want to try or might want to do, fear and shame are the things that will stop those in their tracks. Those are the two things. And so that is when it is helpful again to remind ourselves, this is just an experience I'm having. This is just a thought. This is just a feeling, while also letting that feeling come and feeling how big it is. And that is the tricky part, is having those two awarenesses at the same time, is popping back and forth between those two awarenesses. So that part of you that feels it is dangerous, you must hold and care for that part of you while you are doing the thing that feels scary.
Yeah, that part is kind of buried underneath the idea, what difference does it make? You know, so I said to my son yesterday, or we're texting because he's 18, so we're texting, you know, he's upstairs, so we're texting. Time to do neurofeedback. He said, can I do it tomorrow? And a part of me went, what difference does it make today, tomorrow? But because of this adventure that you've sent me on from last week, I thought, I'm gonna say no, do it today. What if I peel back underneath that, it doesn't really matter. It's fear that if I say no, he'll get upset and angry.
Yes. Yes. And so one of the great ways that we have learned to keep ourselves safe is to convince ourselves that it doesn't matter what we want. But we
Yeah.
can't be a traitor to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because that's how the patterns continue.
Yeah.
And so you are fighting not only for your son, you are fighting for yourself. You're healing both of you through this, of course. Yes. Otherwise, why would you be in this together?
Yeah.
And he is healing both of
But
you.
that's a good tell. You know, that's
Yes.
a good tell that
Yes.
it doesn't really matter. What difference is, you know, today or tomorrow, whatever.
Yes. Yes. And it is also difficult because we understand that many spiritual teachings, including ourselves, say, it doesn't really matter. This isn't real. This is just an experience that your soul is having. And so to recognize the difference between the two different types of it doesn't really matter is important. And we think that that is part of the deep knowing work. Yes, is tuning into what type of it doesn't really matter is this. Yes. Yes. I'll bet you if you tuned into it, it feels different in your body. I'll bet you there are more tells that would help you understand the difference.
Yeah.
Yes, Jennifer.
Well, first of all, is it okay? Are you
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
things? Okay.
Complete. Thanks, Jennifer.
Well, it's interesting because sort of a kind of a corollary of what Kathy was asking was the second thing that was kind of what I was thinking. And Kathy, I'll just say that one point I saw recently within the last year or so, this very simple sentence that said, keeping the peace is a trauma response. And it's the first time I went, oh, I've spent my life keeping the peace. So I'm also undoing lifelong patterns of being the peacemaker. It wasn't dangerous per se, but it was very advantageous for me to read the room and then just, you know, whatever. So having said that, Saul, what the other thing that's kind of on my heart is I've been in this prolonged period of internal, well, I guess I should say, you know, just dealing with my immediate family and sort of the next layer of people have been sort of put on pause, and most people understand that, and just been doing some real deep reflecting on which relationships I want to bring back in and give a lot of energy, and which ones were just kind of there, and maybe I was giving a lot more than I was receiving, or maybe it really wasn't as healthy now that I've taken the time to kind of think about it. And that's hard because I am the one that checks on people, and I am the, you know, that is my role, right? And there's one relationship in particular that we were very intertwined, and I'm not sure I want to go back. I just find myself saying, because she knows the stuff with my family, I'm preoccupied with that, but it isn't all that. It's part of me trying to decide. I don't know that I want to go back to what it was. And so what I heard you telling Kathy was just still sitting in the mystery. I keep thinking I'm supposed to know, or I'm supposed to know what to do. And of course, I've never been here, done this, so I don't know. And so some days it's like, well, I can let her in halfway, or I don't know. I'm just really still wrestling with it. And from the standpoint of that's not very nice. And she's certainly trying she has been checking, and she's been doing all the things that look like a good friend would do to the circumstance I'm in. And yet there's still something that I'm just like, I just don't know that I want you to have access to all of me in the way that you did before.
Mhm.
So I, maybe is there, would you say something different than you said to Kathy, rather, maybe I just need to continue to sit with it?
Yes, I would say that you would need to continue to sit with it. It sounds like you are also coming into your year of saying no. Yes, understanding that you don't have to say yes to everything. That does not make you a nicer or not nicer person, whether you say yes or no.
Mhm.
We would also say that relationships evolve and people change, and that there are times when you resonated with someone. And that could be a positive resonance. Yes, this is someone I want around me all the time. Or it could be a negative resonance, like, oh, this is my teacher and they keep coming into my life and poking at me. And, I need that in some way. Yes. But what happens is that dance ends at a certain point. Yes. And oftentimes it is the person who can see that energy more clearly that recognizes the end of that dance before the other one.
Mhm.
The other thing we would say is just because they are making bids for connection or bids for communication, look at how you process that as I should or I need to respond.
Mhm.
Or relationships aren't about, they are not transactional. Yes, they are not about owing anyone anything or deserving anything from anyone.
Yeah.
And so look at where it has become a transactional piece
Mhm.
and just look at it. That is where you should sit in the mystery. There is no answer. Imagine a world where, like electrons bouncing off each other, when we happen to meet, we happen to meet. When you happen to think of someone, you reached out. When they happen to think of you, they reached out. And there wasn't a like another line of music running underneath that was about the, oh, I owe them, or I just haven't contacted them, or they should contact me. I did this for them, so why aren't they doing this for me? Yes, there's a narrative that we create a lot of times. And this is not necessarily just individual. As a culture, each culture has a narrative, yes, of how we should relate to each other and what it looks like, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe it is time for you to become aware of the actual substance of the relationship at the same time that you're becoming aware of the narrative that is running just underneath.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I think probably what's even exacerbating it more is in all my relationships, starting with my husband and my children. I'm trying to shift into the, I give you what I want to give you freely, and I don't have any expectations. And that's very counter to how I was brought up. But I don't want transactional relationships. And so maybe that's what's making it even more overt, because I don't want to operate that way. I want to be, I'm not keeping track of what I've done, and you're supposed to appreciate this or whatever. So maybe that's another heightening,
Yes.
why it's heightening it even more, because I'm trying to do that in general.
And I think that you are, as someone who is empathic, you are aware when someone would be hurt by the fact that they reached out to you and then you didn't do what they expected in return. Reach out in a commensurate way back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so recognize that you are in that case. If you don't reach back, yes, if you disappoint them, if they become angry at what they perceive of as your lack of action or your lack of care, that you have been lucky enough to be the Judas in that scenario. You are their teacher.
Mm.
You are their teacher.
Yeah.
And we can
Great.
see that that makes you quite uncomfortable, quite uncomfortable.
Yes.
Just as everyone else did, you know, Judas came here to teach and learn,
Yeah.
teach and learn.
Yeah.
And we think that understanding, here is the great lesson in the people who betray us. Understanding that what has truly been betrayed was our expectations.
True.
Yes.
Mhm.
And even in the cases of severe neglect or lack of care, what has really been betrayed in that instance is our idea of what a relationship should look like. It has nothing to do with our worthiness as a human being. But that is the confusion, the mistake, the misattribution that we make. Ah, this person didn't care for me because somehow I was unworthy. The truth is, this person didn't care for me because they were dealing with their own stuff. And because we had certain needs that we expected to be met through that relationship and they weren't. But imagine a world where we didn't attribute that to that we had done something wrong. Yes, a world where it didn't mean that you hadn't kept the peace enough, for example, that you didn't do a good enough job and that's why they were angry at you.
Mhm.
So it is interesting to think about the people in our lives who disappoint us, who betray us. They are teachers just as much as those who hold out a hand and bring us in close and give us a big hug and help us out. And it is hard to see in the moment, but to move through the cycle, the spiral cycle of spiritual growth, we need both. Yes, we need both. Just as we said to Kathy, you need to both climb the ladder and go down into the pit. Yes, this is another form of that. Only this is more challenging because it is on an emotional level
Mhm.
rather than an intuitive or intellectual level. But what it can do to feel betrayed and feel let down is stimulate us to search for that place where it is beyond our human experience, where we know we are not betrayed, we are not let down. We are actually all part of the same thing. And so in that way, that's why we are saying it can be you can be a great teacher. You can be a great teacher.
Certainly makes doing kindness work that much more layered.
Yes.
New definition. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
The kind Judas. Interesting. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for such an interesting discussion. We quite enjoy trying to figure out ways to help you open up to the memory, the understanding, the awareness, the consciousness, the light of the things that seem paradoxical. Yes, that seem unpleasant, that seem counter to the human experience, but are completely ingrained with the spiritual experience. Yes, for those are the most difficult ones to bring into your daily life, to bring into the moment by moment experience. So we thank you for being open to that. We thank you for your continued inquisitiveness. And we just enjoy being with you here every week. So we thank you for being here.